tell in ways that we saw the Holy Spirit moving among us. Good morning, friend. I'm so excited.
Yeah, absolutely.
Today,
Yeah,
we have the vanguard of video, the EGOT of editing, the Mavic magician. If he's got the ball in the paint, you better put him on the line.
There we go.
The great Dexter Evans.
I'll take it. Clap effect here. Oh, that's not.
Wrong button.
How you doing, Mitchell?
I'm good, Dexter.
Good.
We've always wanted to have Dexter on the pod.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it worked out that what do we got? Phil and Rebecca are tied up with Perkins Convocation.
Yep.
So here we are.
And
we're
gonna talk about some tech stuff.
Yeah, this is a tech episode for all you tech lovers. So, as always, our podcast is focused on what happens on Sundays, behind the scenes, extra tidbits of things that we didn't get to in worship. It is a deeper dive into what happens on Sunday mornings. If you missed worship this past Sunday, you can find it on our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel. You can also find our sermons on that same YouTube channel or on our podcast channel where you're listening to this, hopefully. So there's a lot to digest, and we're in a new series called Faithful Friction, looking at conflict and how we can find peace in the midst of conflict. Yesterday was all about forgiveness. Real quick, Dexter, are you one to forgive easily?
I am not. I'm actually a poor forgiver, if I had to just lay it out there. My 8ness really helps that out a little bit. I'm not good at forgiving. Like I don't know what I need for that part, but it's pretty hard for me.
Is it?
Yeah. You
need an apology
well, I just the short answer is I just need some truth from the other side. If you're real with me, it's actually a lot easier to forgive for me, right, if you're real with me. I don't need just an apology. That's not, for me, it's not enough. I need like an honest conversation about whatever it was.
Yeah. I hear that. I think that's the challenge, right? And I think what, we were doing the Sunday sit down yesterday, and Lisa Hancock said forgiveness is like what we do, and reconciliation takes two parties. And I believe that, but I am really hesitant to forgive if I don't get an acknowledgement of
right. For me, there needs to be an honest conversation about it all.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about forgiveness on this podcast.
No, we're not, because it's not going to be a happy day after Sunday if we talk about forgiveness.
We're going to talk about how we've really journeyed to the place we are now, where we're broadcasting podcasts on YouTube and having a really well-produced Sunday morning worship. But it wasn't always the case that here at White Rock we were that tech savvy. So Dexter started attending White Rock. Golly, how long? Over a year ago.
We're over, I think August or September of 19.
Yeah. So a little bit over a year ago. And what was it like when you walked in? Well, why don't you tell people what you do first?
Yeah, I mean, so
introduce yourself, Dexter.
My name's Dexter. Essentially, I have a company called Blue Bear Media that just helps businesses tell their stories. Essentially, I love storytelling. I love the thought of storytelling. I love compiling and making and doing that in whatever way it may be. It could be through photos, it could be through video, it could be through a multitude of different things. And inside all of that, it's super helpful for people to know that there's an avenue that they can go to be able to explain whatever story that they're trying to tell. And so that's kind of what I do in a nutshell. There's another one where I have church photographers also, which is a church consulting group, and I help with the media and the production and the communication side of it all to help help churches find what their communication is, what their plan is, and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
So you started hanging out at White Rock.
Started hanging out at White Rock. I was in a transition phase. I was at a creative group before it happened, and I started coming to White Rock, and I knew that I was going to start a business up, and that's where Blue Bear was essentially founded at that point. And in that transition, I started talking to you and Rebecca, and just kind of figuring out what y'all are doing tech wise. And for me, to be involved in a church, I can't just sit in a pew. I'm someone that has to physically be doing something that I feel like it makes me feel like I'm putting something forth or doing something in some way to be helpful in a way. And I know a good way of that is a lot of behind the scene production type stuff.
Right. Your life is a fidget spinner.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And it's funny because I'm fidgeting with something right now, as you say.
Are you?
Yeah. I have to be doing something. It's just that's
how
I am.
You weren't super impressed with our high tech iPhone Facebook broadcast?
Everybody's got to start somewhere. That's the way I phrase it best.
Right.
Mitchell. You got to do something.
Right.
And then I think there's points and moments in time that open up to enable people or churches or businesses to take the next step or go a little bit deeper with what they're doing. That reaches a broader audience, and it essentially helps tell your story a little bit better once you kind of get into that. So definitely when I showed up, y'all had a good soundboard and you had new sound system and everything like that, and you were in the right place. No one really knew how to use it. I'm not trying to knock on anybody. No one really knew how to use a part. So I'm like, oh, there's a part where I can start working on that side, the sound side. And y'all were using iPhones for that, which wasn't connected to any audio, and it was just whatever sound is coming, you got type of thing.
Yeah, totally. Right. And, so Dexter started hanging out in the balcony, and pretty quickly we realized that we had planned it, right? We had a capital campaign, and we had planned to upgrade our projectors and our video because we wanted to be able to stay both ahead of the curve in terms of tech advance, but we also wanted to make sure that when people were in the space worshiping, that they had an experience, the best experience we could provide them in terms of being able to connect with one another, connect with what was happening. And one of the quiet ways, no pun intended here, that kind of happens is having a really good soundboard, having really good sound, and having a really good video, right? And so it's not about having the fanciest things. It's about having an experience that folks can really connect with. And so we replaced the projectors, and you really consulted on that. I mean, that was the first big step, right? I mean, that's a big step. We went from some really old projectors on Sunday morning to having some really good crisp projectors that could cut through the daylight, because our sanctuary can get pretty bright on Sunday mornings.
Yeah, y'all's biggest thing was you had a good distance throw that you had to do, and you're trying to keep the integrity of the sanctuary at the same time. So you wanted to kind of hide them in the back. And
do you remember how long the distance is? Is it like 75 feet?
Yeah, it's somewhere around there. It's a long throw for a projector for sure. But y'all got great projectors out of it, and it put you on ahead of the curve and what you need to do. There's no bulb in it. The technology that you put in there was really nice. You got a confidence monitor in the back, which is super helpful. And then we spent
monitor, for those listening, is what folks up front look at, because we're not turning our heads to look at the screens behind us, right? Confidence monitor is something that the folks at the up front or in the chancel area are looking at. Yeah, we had one dive. There's a squeaky old projector screen that rolled up and down, and a projector that was from the 1980s, I think.
Right. And then beyond that, we spent a week changing light bulbs out in the place, which we realized that hadn't been done. We realized that the light bulbs that we had currently in the place, they weren't dimmable. They weren't the right lights for dimmable lights. So you had ones that were just burnt out or burnt in half. And there's a bunch of different things. So we set up what we need to set up in the right way, got new light fixtures for the front of stage. I mean, we spent a good amount of time doing all that stuff. And Mitchell can explain how much he loves being up in the lift.
Golly, I got better with it, but we have to change the light bulbs in the sanctuary. We have to go how high?
It's at least a 30-foot reach.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
least.
Right.
And the lifts aren't really, they're stable, but that's feels like an illusion when you are 30 feet up and the thing's like wobbling because like
You feel like a little breath of wind
like
will change it. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
And so that was a huge process changing out these lights because well, it just takes time and moving a lift in between pews isn't easy. So we did all that.
We felt like the momentum was going great. We felt like everything was going.
Our broadcast got better because we bought a camera, right? Remember?
Yep.
Our first like good 4K camera that we were shooting.
We were shooting from balcony, and we actually plugged into the soundboard, so we had decent audio going into it. Like we were making the right steps. Y'all were making the right steps to get into place to start positioning yourselves well for some more growth.
Right. And then
yeah.
And then what happened?
then 2020 happened for lack of words.
Right. Yeah, and it really, I think that's the challenging thing as we think about what Sunday morning is and how much energy and prayer and time and thought goes into worship on Sunday morning in this very defined, both we can repeat it, over and over again, but it's also unique each Sunday. Like there's this amount of weight that Sunday morning is. And then like literally overnight, I remember making the decision, we're pulling down in-person worship and we're going to go live online on Sunday morning. And I remember the chaos. It's hard to remember, but if you think back, remember how we didn't really know. I was at a Mavs game the night that the NBA canceled the season.
That's right. I consider that one of the craziest nights in my life, and not from like what was happening in my life personally, but what I was viewing from a world standpoint. Everything was kind of building up to this pandemic, and then Utah Jazz announces that they had somebody with COVID, and then everybody was sitting at the Mavs game. You're like, this is like everything was getting really real, and it was starting to run about like 200 miles an hour at the same time, which it got real intense real quick.
Definitely. And then like we made the decision, okay, we can't meet in person, so let's go online. And that took a lot of, Rebecca had to rework the liturgy. We went to like a more conversational thing. And then we set up in the library.
Remember we did library. We did library for 1 week or 2 weeks.
We realized, we did it for two or 3 weeks until we realized that like there wasn't enough social distancing happening.
Right.
And we moved into the parlor for a long time.
Parlor for a few months after that point.
What was that like for you as someone who has to like, everything's pretty stationary and pretty static when we're in the sanctuary, shooting live worship. I mean, you're not moving a lot of things. You're not, everything's pretty fixed.
Yeah.
To having to go from that to live production on the move. What's that like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll bring up my previous worlds just a little bit. I mean, I started out probably when I was 16 or 17 at a Baptist church in Brownwood, Texas, First Baptist Church in Brownwood, which was a church that had a 3-camera shoot that went live 3 times a week on the local cable network, probably to about 40 or 50 people. And, they were all happy at that point. Right. But it was one of those things where I got a lot of training at that point, and then I ended up at Highland Park UMC for 10 years. And for 6 of those years, I was the production manager for the contemporary service there also, which involved another 3-camera shoot. It evolved, and each one of those evolved heavily. They didn't really start out as 3-camera shoots, and there were some renovations and remodelings that happened that enabled a 3-camera shoot. So I kind of evolved with that point. And in some way, when I landed in White Rock here, I kind of knew the step process of what is effective and what's not effective. But a lot of times you do that over a phased approach, essentially. You don't just wake up the next morning and go, man, we got to start hitting production a little bit harder to make a overall product better. Because what you're experiencing on the other side is you want to feel like the closeness of the person. You want to see their face. You want to be able to connect with them emotionally. You want to be able to talk to them and communicate and chat and engage and all that type of stuff, to be able to feel like you're a part of the church, even though you're not being able to sit inside the actual physical building. When that makes it really difficult. So you have to, as a production person, you go, okay, how do I make that connection happen? What do we need to put in place to make it feel like you're present and you're in place with everybody else? And that was one of those things. So we thought the library was good because it was a great place, but the social distance aspect of it wasn't there, and we had to go, okay, we need to bring this out just a little bit more. So that's when we landed in the parlor, and then we soon realized after that we need to get back in the sanctuary again, just to kind of get that emotional feeling back in place.
Right. Yeah, and we had to buy a bunch of equipment, right? So we got the ATEM Mini Pro, the switcher,
the Black Magic, yep.
Which is a piece of equipment that essentially has 4 buttons on it, and you can push which camera you want, right? It simply allows you to change camera views really quickly. So we needed that because we needed more than one camera. So we could have that kind of tight shot of, if someone's speaking, we can get really close on that shot. And then you ran a bunch of cabling, and
yeah.
You should see the setup, right? And
it's crazy. I think you might have put a couple pictures on social with it.
Phil's got one. And then lighting's a big deal, right? So we had to play around with lighting a lot in the parlor to figure out how it's going to look. I mean,
I tell people all the time, you could have the best camera in the world, but if you don't have audio or lighting right, people aren't going to connect with you in the same way. And you want to be able to make sure you do that type of thing.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, behind the scenes, oh man, it's hard. Every time somebody comes in as a guest and they physically put themselves in the room, they're always surprised how much is happening on stage that they don't realize that they see at home. And I always consider that a huge win every time that happens, only because the less that people feel like cameras and lights and audio is present, the more that they can connect with the people that are actually doing their job on screen. And I always consider that a big piece. If you feel like the quality is not there or the audio is not matching up to the voice and whatnot, which happened. We had to work with drifting audio a lot of times too, that you start feeling disconnected and it takes you away. And for a production person, you want to make sure all those pieces are hidden as close to 100% as possible. And it's all at the same time, it's extremely stressful and fun and invigorating at the same time. Like it's really unique stuff for sure.
Yeah. And I think, we've had long conversations about camera angles and lighting, and those things were not a part of our repertoire when we designed worship in the beginning, right? So, thinking about what camera shots convey certain emotions, or how do we feel connected with folks, or folks feel connected with us. Like those are all decisions we have to make, and we actually add them to the thinking and the thought process that is, Sunday morning, which is new and different for us, right? We're typically that level of thought about how we're going to broadcast something was never. I mean, it was literally my iPhone, on the third pew, and then, sometimes if it was Neil's, it would be upside down, somehow broadcasting upside down.
Or the good old landscape, but we already pressed go and we turned it sideways, so everybody has to physically turn their phones in awkward ways to make it work, type of thing.
Or during the passing of the piece, rest in peace, passing of the piece, because I don't know when that's coming back. We had someone would bump into it and it just kind of goes sideways, and you'd just be looking 45 of a video that's angled, right? Like that was the extent of our thinking.
And you didn't need to think past that because you had such great momentum happening inside the sanctuary. Like it wasn't a forethought for sure.
Right. but then the pandemic hit, and we had to say, okay, all the not all, but some of the energy we spent talking about what happens in the physical space, we have to shift and apply it to what happens in the digital space. And I think churches aren't, we weren't prepared for that.
Right.
Because for so many of us, I'll just speak as a senior pastor, right? For so many senior pastors, there's a certain threshold that one has to get to before we really are interested in investing in online video and worship and production and online ministry, right? Like we're naturally taught that the most important thing is what happens in the physical space on Sunday mornings. What happens on social media feeds or live streams is good, but not the most important thing. And you have to kind of get to a certain size church before that's even really available.
Right. Right.
And
I mean, because technology, unfortunately, is just not. It's not like buying a few Bibles and sticking them in a pew. The cost of the entryway for it is so incredible. It can be overwhelming so easily to anybody that's not experienced or not knowing what they need to put in there, or what level they need to enter in some way. That it's very overwhelming. It's hard. It's really hard.
It is overwhelming, and the good thing is we had capital campaign funds.
Right.
That we had available to us. Right. So in some ways, like we were able to accelerate because we had the actual money, the cash on hand to go out and buy the things we needed without much worry. But also, I mean, not everyone, right. Vast majority of churches don't have Dexter Evans, like, popping around being like, I need, fidget spinning beautiful things into existence, right? Like we don't really we're incredibly blessed and lucky just to have you and both as a part of the team and part of the church and like your family. Like it's just lucky. We got lucky on that front, right? So like I recognize that, but I think that a lot of churches still have the capacity to like up their game for very little.
Yeah, I found just beyond y'all, I've been in communication with almost a dozen churches and trying to help solve the pandemic problem for them, because everybody was caught off guard and nobody was really ready to dive into what is being put in front of them in a certain way, and it's tricky. And I will say one of the better things that has happened out of the pandemic, if we could look at any light in a dark tunnel, is to acknowledge that we have found that the church is not really made up of the building, and that we're learning quickly that the church is made up of people, and it's made up of what we do as a community and as a group together, and how we communicate and make that happen for all of us together. And I think we've just been forced in that corner. And usually when you force somebody in a corner, they fight their way out in the best way that they can. And I think White Rock has done a great job in all of that.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk about what the church is going to look like, or how much of the church pre-pandemic is going to return post-pandemic, and those conversations are happening around giving. They're happening around the literal, worship. Rebecca's having those conversations around singing and what is, the choir look like, and how do we, figure those things out. I know that conversations about that are happening around giving. Will we ever really pass an offering plate again? Right. If you go 4 years without passing an offering plate, and we find a way to make sure that people have the ability to give faithfully and worship through that act of giving without an offering plate, then I don't know if we'll ever bring it back. Right. I think the same can be said about how we occupy online space. Like,
absolutely.
Are we ever going to go back? Right, to where we were? And there's probably no way. I mean, we've invested time to learn, money into the equipment, and we've built in, there's an organic audience of folks who are staying engaged online. But I'm curious from your perspective, like, how do you stay engaged in that space long term? Like, what do you think churches need to like stay in that online space for a long time?
I think the best thing that churches can do to stay in that online space is to, and I think Phil Dickey, he does a great job at this, is to make sure that everyone feels connected. And that connection point means so much to so many different people, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. For White Rock, they love feeling and talking and communicating. White Rock, by far, has been the best church communication that I've seen for y'all size church across the board. The amount of engagement and interaction that happens on a week to week basis is fantastic. I absolutely, absolutely love it. But that works really well for White Rock. And you have to ask yourself, in whatever church you may be or whatever position you are inside that church, is how do we connect people in the best way possible? And I know that you and I and Phil and Rebecca, we've all talked about what is our best engagement point. And we're continuing to evolve that thought, and we're continuing to question all of that. And for me, it's really just, how do we connect best in all of it, if that makes sense.
Mhm. So I see Elizabeth Van Ort. I know her. She asked the question, what's one piece of technology that a church with a smaller budget should invest in
For online space?
to best adapt to the online space?
And I have an Amazon list built because I've done this so many times during this pandemic. It's just a small little setup, small little production setup. It's just a camera, audio, light, and that's it. And it depends whether or not you want to be pre-recorded or recording. If you want to record, there are some options out there to help you stream to the computer and whatnot. Pre-recorded, you really just need that audio. I got a church in Kentucky that they've pre-recorded since the pandemic started, and they just have a light, a camera, and everything, and it's highly effective for them, and it works best for their group and whatnot. And it's something that they pre-shoot everything with a camera. And if they want to highlight anything for the month, they'll pre-shoot that. I'll edit it for them and kind of go from there with it. But yeah, I mean, it's just a small, I got an Amazon wish list. So if you're a church out there and you want to know, and you got a small budget and you really want to break in for that $1,000 or less type mentality, I got something for you.
Yeah,
Make that happen.
I think what's incredible about it is, you can take very small steps, right? Like what we're doing right here, this setup, this podcast setup, can be done for under $300.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Right now, the light on my face is a $10 lamp from Amazon.
Right.
And it's not even that good of lighting, but it's good enough. Right.
Right.
And so I think that's the challenge is not necessarily cost. It's also confidence.
Right.
You have the confidence in the technology to pull it off.
Right.
And I think that's where, like, a bunch of YouTube tutorial videos, like, I see patients saying, she's watching it now. It's a very small church. It feels like this is way out of our wheelhouse. I would say, like, as a medium-sized church, what we're currently doing also felt like it's way out of our wheelhouse. And I think that we have the ability to kind of trust that it doesn't have to be perfect, but we can take a step. We can take a step in the right direction.
Right.
Just simply putting light and if you shoot worship on your iPhone, invest in a $50 Rode microphone.
Yep.
Pick up the sound better, right?
Right.
Just that, I think.
Right. And you got to run the rules of the limitations that you have. Everything has a box around it. And people say, when I hear the phrase from a creative standpoint, think outside the box, I absolutely dread that statement every time I hear it, because honestly, you want to know what the box is so you can push the boundaries of the box as much as possible. Because everybody doesn't have an unlimited budget. And if you have an iPhone and a Rode mic and a $10 Amazon light, then you got to go, okay, here's my box. What's the boundaries that I can push on it? And naturally, you just say, I can't stand that far away from the mic. Like, I have to be a little bit closer to the mic.
Yeah, we've got to move the camera closer, right?
Right. I got to position the more face eye level with me instead of like up the nose or down the head type shot. You kind of want to be straight on a little bit more so the mic can pick up what you need to best. And it's just you work inside the box and the constraints that you have, and then you push it as hard as you can. And then when you start busting out of that box, you start looking at other options start making things
Right.
happen for you.
Yeah, I think it's also we live in an age where so many people are doing video
Right.
that like on YouTube you can get a quick tutorial about lighting, about sound, and about camera position.
Right.
And so if this is like brand new to folks, whether it's church or you're at home and you're going to stay on Zoom for the next 6 months and you're like, I'm going to up my like professionalism a little bit here. Or you're like, I'm going to have a holiday party and I want my parents to be able to, see me the best as they can, even though they can't be
Right.
in the space for Thanksgiving. Whatever it is, there are ways to just Google, watch some YouTube videos about camera placement, about lighting, and about a microphone. And the amount of, that may be the best dividends that you get.
Yeah.
If you invest in those three things, you will take leaps forward in terms of production, which for us as a church is important because we're looking at production as a type of evangelism, right? Because what we're hoping is that as people are, we know that our folks are going to turn into worship. We also have an opportunity to have other people join our community as they scroll their social media feeds, right? Or they're on YouTube or whatever. And so we want to have a production value that's high enough to pique people's interest and have them stop because we think what we have to say is really important.
Right. The best thing that you can do as a church is not get complacent in the fact that you're doing online worship every week. You really have to put forth energy to make it feel like it's something fresh and new every time you do something, that you're there, that you feel like you're connected in some way. Yeah, I think there are some churches that are like, oh man, we had to do online. So they just started doing online and they didn't really think through the steps that they needed to make it feel like it's church, if that makes sense.
I think maybe we should have another podcast, you and me, and maybe get very specific about some of the things like here are 10 things to do, or here's 10 things that we've learned.
Yeah.
Because we've learned a lot.
Yeah.
And maybe it can be a resource for churches that don't have a ton of cash on hand. Because we're gonna we had a ton of capital campaign cash on hand, but we don't have it's not like we got a ton of just budget cash on hand, right? And so
and in all honesty, it's good for myself to be here. It's nice to have my production equipment available also that helps enhance it all, because I mean that's just another investment that probably isn't there right now. And it just and no, I agree. Let's do another one.
Maybe we do another one where we're sitting around, we just walk through here are the 10 things you can do for under $1,000.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Or here are 10 things that we learned, that's worth the time and not worth the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of try to figure out a way to help churches and folks make sense of their video production, because your spare bedroom could be your
I follow a church in Ohio. I forgot the name of it, but essentially they rented out an apartment. They wouldn't have a physical space, so they rented out an apartment. And they do their whole production from inside that apartment, and they do it really, really well. And when I watched it one Sunday, I go, "This is amazing what y'all are able to put out there from working from an apartment. One room's the production room, another the half of the living room is the worship space. They have announcements in another room. Like it's pretty awesome. And there's nothing really constraining you, and there's a lot of options that you can make that work for you."
Totally. That's cool. That's really cool. Well, Dexter's the man behind the camera and keyboards and 9 monitors and blah blah blah. But
shout out to Charlie also.
Yeah, Charlie
has been helping us in the past few months.
Awesome. Charlie is
fantastic.
Is a really amazing dude who shows up and
so everyone can know. I want people to know this. The things that have to be run all at the same time at every second of the service is audio, video. And when I say video, it breaks down into subcategories of switching, and then titles and playback, and computer graphics, and then you have You have slides that you got to put out there also. And there's about 4 or 5 different things that happen concurrently at the same time throughout the whole service. And if you ever get to experience that, we may put a GoPro back there just to see what is happening.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
We should definitely do that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, it's great. It's awesome to have Dexter around. And for y'all that have never seen Dexter or heard Dexter speak, here he is. And we'll have him back on the pod soon. So what's the rest of your day look like, Dexter?
I got some edits to do. I got a few churches and a few companies needing some product done. So we're making it happen.
Well, blessings, my friend. Thanks for jumping on.
Absolutely.
We'll catch up with y'all later. You're listening to a podcast recorded at White Rock United Methodist Church in the heart of East Dallas. For more information, you can find us at wrumc.org. And make sure you stay subscribed to this channel to stay up to date with all of our content.